Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Gopi Jana Ballava Giri Bharadhare. Gopi Jana Ballava Giri Bharadhare. Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachare. Yamunatira Vanachare. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Gopi Jana Ballava Giri Bharadhare. Gopi Jana Ballava Giri Bharadhare. Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachare. Yamunatira Vanachare. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jai Vishnupad, Paramahansa, Paramahansa, Titus Srimad. His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki. ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki. Shri Giri Govardhan Ki. Shri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki. Sankirtan Yagya Ki. Go Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. I need the telephone just to direct these things properly. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 25. The descriptions of the characteristics of King Paranjan, text 62. Vipralabdho Mahishyavam Sarva Prakriti Vanchita Nechchan Anukaroti Agya Klaibyat Krida Mrigo Yata Vipralabdo Mahishyavam Sarva Prakriti Vanchita Nechchananu Karotyagya Klaibyat Krida Mrigo Yata Vipralabdo Mahishyavam Sarva Prakriti Vanchita Nechchananu Karotyagya Klaibyat Krida Mrigo Yata Vipralabdo Mahishyavam Sarva Prakriti Vanchita Nechchananu Karotyagya Klaibyat Krida Mrigo Yata. Ladies. Vanchita Anukarojagya Klaibyat Krida Mrigayata Vipralabda captivated Maheshya by the queen Evam thus Sarva all Prakriti, existence, Vanchita, being cheated, Na Ichchan, without desiring, Anukaroti, used to follow and imitate, Agya, the foolish king, Klaibyat, by force, Krida Mriga, a pet animal, Yata, just like. Translation. In this way, King Puranjan was captivated by his nice wife and was thus cheated. Indeed, he became cheated in his whole existence in the material world. Even against that poor foolish king's desire, he remained under the control of his wife, just like a pet animal that dances according to the order of its master. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The word Vipralabdha is very significant in this verse. Vi means specifically, and Pralabdha means obtained. Just to satisfy his desires, the king got the queen, and thus he became cheated by material existence. Although he was not willing to do so, he remained a pet animal under the control of material intelligence. Just as a pet monkey dances according to the desires of its master, the king danced according to the desires of the queen. In Srimad Bhagavatam 5.5.2 it is said, Mahatsevam dwaram ahur vimukte. If one associates with a saintly person, a devotee, one's path of liberation becomes clear. But if one associates with a woman or with a person who is too much addicted to a woman, his path of bondage becomes completely clear. On the whole, for spiritual advancement, one must give up the company of women. This is what is meant by the order of sannyas, the renounced order. Before taking sannyas, or completely renouncing the material world, one has to practice avoiding illicit sex. Sex life, licit or illicit, is practically the same, but through illicit sex, one becomes more and more captivated. By regulating one's sex life, there is a chance that one may eventually be able to renounce sex or renounce the association of women. If this can be done, advancement in spiritual life comes very easily. How one becomes captivated by the association of one's dear wife is explained in this chapter by Narada Muni. Attraction for one's wife means attraction for the material qualities. One who's attracted by the material quality of darkness is in the lowest stage of life, whereas one who is attracted by the material quality of goodness is in a better position. Sometimes we see that when a person is on the platform of material goodness, he is attracted more or less by the cultivation of knowledge. This is, of course, a better position, for knowledge gives one the preference to accept devotional service. Unless one comes to the platform of knowledge, the Brahmabhuta stage, one cannot advance in devotional service. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita chapter 18 verse 54, Brahmabhuta prasanatma na shochati na kankshati samaksarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param. Translation: one who is thus transcendently situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He's equally disposed to every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. The platform of knowledge is advantageous because it is a means by which one may come to the stage of devotional service. However, if one takes to devotional service directly, knowledge is revealed without separate endeavor. This is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam 127. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayat Yashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayada Hoitukam. Devotional service automatically reveals actual knowledge of our material existence. One who is sufficiently intelligent immediately attains the stage of renunciation of so-called society, family, and love, as well as other things. As long as we're attached to society, family, and love of the material world, there is no question of knowledge, nor is there a question of devotional service. By directly taking to devotional service, however, one becomes filled with knowledge and renunciation. In this way, one's life becomes successful. Thus in the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 4th canto, 25th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Descriptions of the Characteristics of King Paranjan. Vipralabdo mahishyavam sarva prakriti vanchita nechchana nu karotyagya klaibyat kridam rigoyata. In this way, King Paranjan was captivated by his nice wife and was thus cheated. Indeed, he became cheated in his whole existence in the material world. Even against that poor foolish king's desire, he remained under the control of his wife, just like a pet animal that dances according to the order of its master. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Niravishesha Shunyavadi Pastichade Shiktarane Vanchakalpatarubhyas Chaikripa Sindhubhya Evata Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Yes, so this in many respects, it's not the end of the story of King Paranjan actually by any means. There is more to come. There are a few chapters more to come actually, but certainly it is a type of summary of certain very important, very aspects of the story of Paranjan. And as has been stated in different ways in some of the previous verses, he became excessively attached to his wife, his nice wife, as described here, because oftentimes, at least, not actually all of the time, but at least many times, she was very nice to him, and that just helped him become more, as Prabhupada says, captivated, with the result of him being in that way, in those ways, cheated of the possibility of achieving the goal of life, cheated of the possibility of, what to speak of, achieving actually the goal of life, but cheated of really even making any sort of reasonable start in the direction of approaching the goal of life. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. Yes, as Prabhupada says here in the purport we read, if one associates with a woman or with a person who's too much addicted to a woman, his path of bondage becomes completely clear. That you can't become more clear than completely clear. It would, as Prabhupada states, if one associates with a saintly person, a devotee, one's path of liberation becomes clear. But this is now the opposite. And it's all on the basis of association, that by association with women, in a sense one can say the opposite sex, or particularly with a person who is just too much addicted, then your path of bondage within this material world becomes completely clear. It's just, that's it. That's all that's really happening in one's life. So, yes, as Srila Prabhupada points out, right at the beginning of the purport, the very first word in the Sanskrit, vipralabdha, or vipralabdho, is meaning specifically obtained, or really Prabhupada is, well, in the word for word, captivated. Specifically captivated and just extremely deeply captivated. V means specifically, and in the same sense, like very, very strongly, it means just with extreme focus or complete preoccupation. So in this case, Paranjan, he became completely preoccupied with his wife. It would have been one thing if his wife was a devotee, but if his wife was really a devotee, she would have interacted with him in very different ways. And their relationship would have been extremely different. So this is indicating captivated, deeply entranced, overwhelmed, and totally preoccupied with the relationship with his wife, but not a spiritual relationship, just a material relationship. And of course, as we read, some days ago we read that the queen, in one sense, because this is an allegorical type of description, the queen, of course the queen is the queen, but at the same time, the queen represents material intelligence. And material, in a sense, means material attachment. So for her part, she was as attracted as it's possible to be to getting all material facilities from her husband. Of course, naturally in the relationship between husband and wife, there's give and take, and sometimes the wife may feel she really requires something, and the husband, it may not be totally clear to him, so she may have to present it a little more strongly. But in this case, it was basically non-stop, and to the nth degree, meaning as much of whatever she wanted as possible, because he was the king, and material resources were at his disposal, as much as he wanted, even more than what he might want. Some of these very, very rich people, they acquire so many things that they just cannot think, what more do I want? Yeah. So in this case, the king, Puranjan, he had facility, just plenty of facility. And the queen, being well aware of that, she took advantage as much as possible. And he, as Srila Prabhupada, as the verse mentions and Prabhupada mentions, elaborates a little further in the purport, he became like a pet animal. And even though a pet animal, Prabhupada mentions, a monkey, a pet monkey, the owner may tell the monkey, dance. And the monkey dances. And the audience who's watching is, they're very pleased. Look at this. How nice. But as far as the monkey is concerned, not that the monkey was feeling like dancing. I want to dance now. But, okay, now that's the signal. I must dance. And this was the situation of Puranjan. And as Prabhupada mentions here, that sometimes, in the verse, even against that poor foolish king's desire, he remained under the control of his wife. Sometimes he was thinking that, why do you want this? And why must I get that and do something and not do something else? But he couldn't resist. There was nothing he could do. So of course it's allegorical, and in that sort of extreme situation of the allegory of King Puranjan and his wife, it's just the most extreme possibility of being absorbed in material life. But not that everyone is in such a dramatic situation in terms of being influenced by their wife or material intelligence. But, as Prabhupada says, if one associates with a woman, or particularly really is in that type of situation where one is really preoccupied and being manipulated by the woman, or if one is associating with a person who is too much addicted to a woman, because association is such a powerful factor in a person's life. So when a person gets into those types of situation, then, as Prabhupada says, his path of bondage becomes completely clear. And therefore Srila Prabhupada makes the point here that for spiritual advancement, if one wants to really achieve the goal of life and get out of the entanglements of material existence, one must give up the company of women. Or one could also say, possibly, of men from the perspective of women. But Prabhupada, speaking particularly about men, explains this is what is meant by sannyas, the order of sannyas, the renounced order of life. The shastric injunction is there, panchasordvam vanam vrajet, that when a person, or a man particularly, reaches the age of 50, vanam vrajet, they must go to the forest. And Srila Prabhupada elsewhere also explains this means going to Vrindavan, going to Mayapur, going to these sacred places and becoming situated in Krishna consciousness in these sacred places, independent from the opposite sex, independent from women, and independent from material attractions and material involvements. But the thing is, even though sannyas, this is what accepting the sannyas order of life means, it's not that, at least generally speaking, it's not that someone can just take sannyas and there they go, there you are, now you're a sannyasi. Yesterday you were something else, but today you're a sannyasi, particularly in a really meaningful sense of the term. Yes, so therefore, within Srila Prabhupada's ISKCON, having learnt the lessons, learnt many lessons actually, as as they say, the school of hard knocks, and sort of different sorts of knocks. If one is sensitive or clear-headed enough, then it doesn't have to just be hard knocks which awaken a person to reality and trying to improve his or her life. But experience is a great teacher, that's a fact. So therefore Prabhupada makes the point, before taking sannyas or completely renouncing the material world, one has to practice avoiding illicit sex. And Prabhupada makes, actually it's a very important point, and elsewhere Prabhupada makes the same point, even more emphatically, actually, but here he says, sex life, licit, in the context of Vaishnav Grihastha life, and the principles involved there, or just regular materialistic illicit sex, Prabhupada says it's practically the same. But particularly through illicit sex life, one becomes more and more captivated. Yes, elsewhere Prabhupada says that, here he says that sex life, licit or illicit, is practically the same. Elsewhere Prabhupada says it is the same in the sense of the impact, the effect it has on a person. So at the very least, if there's some idea of one taking sannyas, and Srila Prabhupada, as I'm sure so many of you have read, if you've read Prabhupada extensively, then you would see that Srila Prabhupada, on a number of occasions, not just once or twice or three times, but on quite a number of occasions, Prabhupada makes this point, or he repeats this little sutra, Panchasodvam Vanam Vrajet, that having reached the age of 50, a person must go to the forest or leave household life and fully dedicate themselves in Krishna consciousness with a view to perfecting one's life. So this is there. And, Srila Prabhupada, of course, is not with us physically, but if he were to be, of course, sure, if he was, how old would he be? But anyway, 120 years old. But it would be interesting if he was here, what he would think, because so many of his disciples and others have reached 50 and 60 and 70 like this. Yes. And so many of them without vanam vrajet, going to the forest. So at least for someone who's in grihastha existence, for those who are not already as brahmacharis and like that, that's a different thing. One has to practice, of course, remaining detached or becoming detached. But otherwise, for householders, they must regulate their sex life. And if they do that, the way Prabhupada puts it, there is a chance that one may eventually be able to renounce sex or renounce the association of women. And if this can be done, advancement in spiritual life comes very easily. So Srila Prabhupada explores that point initially in the purport here, and then Srila Prabhupada goes on and develops another point, and that is, he begins by sort of switching a little slowly, you could say, from this specific point of the relationship with women and particularly in the context of Paranjan and his particular woman. So Prabhupada then goes on to discussing about the modes, that one who's attracted by the material quality of darkness, the mode of ignorance, is in the lower stage of life, whereas one who's attracted by the material quality of goodness is in a better position. And of course it's noticeable, Prabhupada goes on, the next sentence, sometimes we see that when a person is on the platform of material goodness, he is attracted more or less by the cultivation of knowledge. This is, of course, a better position. For knowledge gives one the preference to accept devotional service. And if you cannot come to the platform of knowledge, the Brahma Bhuta stage, you can't really advance, you cannot advance in devotional service. Prabhupada just refers to Bhagavatam, 4th canto, chapter 30, verse 20. It's a somewhat famous verse. Prabhupada does refer to this fairly frequently, actually. 4:30:20, so it's coming in a few chapters. I'm not sure how long that will take us. It'll take a while, but anyway, it's coming. 4:30:20, and it's kind of a parallel, or Prabhupada on a number of occasions refers to this verse and quotes this verse, 4:30:20, at the same time that he quotes or refers to this verse from Bhagavad Gita 18:54. Let's just have a quick look at that 4:30:20. Here it is. Navyavad Dridaye yajgyo brahmaitad brahmavadabe namuyanti nashochanti na hrishyanti yato gata. The translation: always engaging in the activities of devotional service, devotees feel ever increasingly fresh and new in all their activities. The all-knower, the supersoul within the heart of the devotee, makes everything increasingly fresh. This is known as the Brahman position by the advocates of the absolute truth. In such a liberated stage, Brahma Bhuta, one is never bewildered, nor does one lament or become unnecessarily jubilant. This is due to the Brahma Bhuta situation. It's a little, of course, as you saw, it's somewhat more elaborate, but in the end, the Brahma Bhuta stage is focused upon. And like we mentioned, we've seen how Prabhupada refers to these two verses together quite often, actually. Quite often. Yes, and then the Bhagavad Gita verse 18:54, Brahma Bhuta prasanatma nashochati nakangshati samaksarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param. It's a little more condensed, you could say. One who is thus transcendently situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman, and becomes fully joyful. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He's equally disposed to every living entity. In that state he attains pure devotional service unto me. So this term Brahma Bhuta is sometimes used, and of course the impersonalists, they're fond of using it in the sense of impersonal realization, becoming situated in some impersonal realization, or at least impersonal state of understanding. But as we see from, well, that verse, if you are listening carefully, 4th canto, chapter 30, verse 20, it's talking about actually coming to devotional service and advancing in devotional service. And this verse from Bhagavad Gita 18:54 is very specifically, there's certain, when you become Brahma Bhuta, transcendentally situated, then you become blissful, nashochati nakangshati, certain symptoms are there. You don't lament, you don't desire to have anything, particularly anything material, And sama sarveshu bhuteshu. Sama, you see all living entities the same. He's equally disposed to every living entity. In that state he attains pure devotional service unto me. So this is presented here, Prabhupada is presenting this in the context of coming to goodness. Even though initially the material quality of goodness, which is a better position, but it's not the most desirable position, because it's better because the person is attracted more or less by the cultivation of knowledge. Because you need, if you don't have knowledge, then what's the likelihood of becoming a devotee? At least it helps greatly if one's situated in the mode of goodness and has an attraction to cultivating knowledge. Yes, and that platform of knowledge is advantageous because, as Prabhupada says here, it's a means by which you can come to devotional service. But then Prabhupada, of course, makes another point, which is a very important point. If you can take, or if you do take to devotional service directly, then knowledge is revealed to you without having to make particularly some big effort independent of your devotional service to become spiritually knowledgeable. Without separate endeavor, knowledge comes. Prabhupada quotes famous verse, Bhagavatam 127, Janiyat yashu vairagyam jnanam cha yad ahoitukam. Vairagya, renunciation, jnanam, knowledge. They come ahaitukam, causelessly, without you having to make some effort to accumulate knowledge. Things are revealed to you by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by the grace of devotees. And as we know, in ISKCON, Srila Prabhupada was really very insistent that we read his books. He wanted, there's the comment he makes in one of the last purports in the Madhya Leela, it's about 6 or 7 verses or something, before the end, the actual end of the Madhya Leela, Prabhupada makes the point that everyone, all the devotees must read his books. And, seeing we mentioned it, let's just look it up. One of the benefits of having an omniscient, not omniscient, but very knowledgeable computer. Just bear with me for a few seconds. It won't take long. It's verse 250 something, or just right at the end of the Madhya Leela. So let's see how we're doing. What is this? What now? Anyone? Oh, here it is. Verse 277. The translation of the verse is, men become strong and stout by eating sufficient grains, but the devotee who simply eats ordinary grains but does not taste the transcendental pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna, gradually becomes weak and falls down from the transcendental position. However, if one drinks but a drop of the nectar of Krishna's pastimes, his body and mind begin to bloom, and he begins to laugh, sing, and dance. So this is now the purport, Prabhupada's purport to this verse. All the devotees connected with the Krishna consciousness movement must read all the books that have been translated. The Caitanya Charitamrita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and others. Otherwise, after some time, they'll simply eat, sleep, and fall down from their position. Thus they'll miss the opportunity to attain an eternal blissful life of transcendental pleasure. Yes, so for us as aspiring devotees, this aspect, even though it's a fact, and Prabhupada has pointed out, if someone simply takes to devotional service, knowledge will be relieved without separate endeavor. But despite that, Prabhupada himself made that point, just like what we just read, that actually we must read all his books. It's not exactly a separate endeavor, really, because, like an endeavor, like work, because it's nectar. It's just nectar. Hearing and chanting about Krishna, my gosh. To develop a taste for that is just one of the greatest assets one can have in devotional service. So, yes, at least people must be encouraged to cultivate some goodness, which includes following our regulative principles. Because they're to help us to come to goodness, to help us to avoid those low-class activities of passion and ignorance. So encourage people to live pious lives and to be Krishna conscious as much as possible. This is the preaching of the Krishna consciousness movement. Because otherwise, unless one is able to come to the point of knowledge and some renunciation, then Prabhupada says, as long as we're attached to society, family, and love of the material world, there's no question of knowledge, nor is there a question of devotional service. But if we engage nicely in devotional service, one will become filled with knowledge and renunciation, and in this way our lives will become successful. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Any comments, questions, any points? Yes, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I was just thinking about this point about cultivating knowledge, and that brings you, as Prabhupada says, it can bring you to the stage of devotional service.
Just say that again.
Cultivating knowledge can bring you to the stage of practicing devotional service.
Okay.
So, what exactly is this content of knowledge that is bringing you? What knowledge is it that is bringing you to devotional service? And where do we get that, or where do those persons get that type of knowledge from?
Yes. Well, you've indicated. Yes, we have to associate with devotees. It's not knowledge in the sense of, PhD or that sort of academic knowledge just in and of itself. It's definitely of a transcendental nature, or more specifically, a Krishna conscious nature, Because if it's impersonal or impersonally tinged or something like that, then it's unlikely, at least, to help someone really come to Krishna consciousness, to be like a real impetus. But rather that impetus, knowledge being an impetus for devotional service, for Krishna consciousness, means knowledge received from the association of devotees. And where did they get it? Well, they got it from the same place or places, and even Srila Prabhupada's books. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's not just that this is another way of getting knowledge of Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada spoke the books, and by reading, we are, in a certain sense, we're hearing from Srila Prabhupada. Yes, and Prabhupada got it from Srila Bhakti Siddhanta and other great acharyas like this. So therefore it's essential, it's actually essential. It's not optional or just something helpful or, it's a good thing, which, the idea of being in the mode of goodness could be taken to suggest. But it's really a point of getting the association of devotees as regularly as possible, or even ultimately and ideally living in the association of devotees, and in the world, the environment of focused devotional service. And so people do like this, and it's unusual, not that so many things can happen, but it's unusual if someone's living in the association of devotees and hearing regularly. It's unusual that they then, it's very unusual that they just go completely away from Krishna consciousness, even if for whatever reason living in the association is not practical or something like that. But we see that they stay connected. Yes, so that stimulus of transcendental knowledge, well, in one sense, of course, it's embodied, literally embodied, in the association of devotees, because the devotees are enacting that knowledge, putting it into actual effect in their program of activities. And this is what acharya means, someone who teaches by example. If you just watch the life of a good devotee, then you're seeing Bhagavad Gita in action, and like that. And that's just such a great way of learning, such an effective way of teaching. And then, of course, there's the actual information. How does that sound to you?
Thank you, man.
You got some...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was also thinking sometimes, I've heard it, that devotees sometimes feel that on the basis of that verse, Jnanam Chayadahoitikam, that if we simply perform devotional service, then automatically knowledge comes to us, which is true, it's coming. So on that basis, they sometimes have this weird understanding, well, I just do devotional service and I don't have to read any books.
Right.
But as you've been explaining, Prabhupada's books has his association embedded into it.
Yes.
And it's not a separate thing, it's actually directly devotional service just by reading Prabhupada's books. It's not something else like cultivation of knowledge. It's
Yeah.
bhakti, directly bhakti.
even if it's done on an academic basis to get Bhakti Shastri or whatever. But it's not just academic. Yeah, it doesn't become... And as we read that purport, Prabhupada, from the Caitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada specifically says, must read all these books. You know, it's not like a fifth regulative principle exactly, but it has sort of that type of position in effect. It's a necessity for success in devotional service. Otherwise, you know, if one is just simply living on the basis, like deliberately, I'll just do devotional service, and that will be sufficient, full stop. Then, at least from what Prabhupada says there, it would appear that in due course, or at least their position in devotional service may not become very strong, or like, you know, they may not make sufficient progress towards the goal of life.
It's like one place Prabhupada commented that distributing my books will keep the devotees happy, but reading my books will keep them.
Right.
Will keep them.
Yes. Well, I was personally present in Prabhupada's room in Bhaktivedanta Manor when Prabhupada addressed the German book distribution party, which had come over, like about, I don't know, at least 15 or 20 of them. Brahmacharis, I mean, you know, sure, in a certain sense of the term, you could say. And Prabhupada asked them, what is the main thing? And however many there were, anyway, maybe not, but a number of hands went up. Book distribution, Srila Prabhupada? No. And then couple of other suggestions. And then Prabhupada said, you must read these books. The question was, what is the main thing? And the answer was, you must read these books. Yeah. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Thanks for the enlightening talk you brought up today. So, I was just thinking about back then when I was working in Tien. And sometimes on my break time I used to chant, but I mostly carry two books, Bhagavad Gita and Krishna book. So I have like 15 minutes break in between, and then like I took a Krishna book and read. So when I read Krishna book, it had some sort of an effect in my life. But also, like as when you read Krishna book, you start to visualize what's happening in the picture, the pastime. So it created an effect in my life like that.
Yes, just look. There you are, the living effect. Yes, great, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.